Britta, what are you working on right now?
Well, as you can probably see from my desk.
And I'm just going to pan because this looks like my old desk.
I know, I should have cleaned up before you got here.
No, it's great.
Working on a lot of different things. Accountability is one of the huge focuses for research today. With the economy, but even before the economy, everyone wants to make sure that they know where their dollars are going and what value they're providing, what's the return on this investment. So I spent a lot of time working in that area. I recently, actually 2 or 3 weeks ago, I delivered a paper with a colleague from MediaVest, David Schiffman, on media mix modeling. And accountability, again, is huge, but what's the issue with accountability? In magazines, we often hear, oh, magazines don't work in the model, and what does that really mean? So we undertook a project where we tried to understand what exactly does that mean and can we change it. And what it turns out is that magazines, the way the media mix models work is they're all based on sales, and sales are reported on a weekly basis. So models go in and put media inputs that are relevant to those weeks. So television, obviously, you can put in weekly GRPs, and other media can put in weekly levels and demographic and geographic. But with magazines, it was very limited on the inputs. So what we're finding is that even though a magazine, by nature of the way it's read, it takes a period of time for the whole audience to accumulate, putting all the GRPs in the first week in the models was illustrating no impact on sales. So you'd see the sales go like this, and the magazine would have a big GRP, but the sales would plot along, and you'd think, so magazines aren't working. So this paper we did was to interview a number of modeling companies to determine what their best practices were and how they felt about magazines. And the good news was that all the magazines, all the modeling companies would say, if we had better input, it would be great. It certainly would help in the model. So it turns out MRI and other companies, but primarily MRI in the States, is able to deliver accumulated GRPs by DNA. So that kind of data is much more of a replicate of what's happening in the real world. So if you have actual data, the models will actually illustrate the benefits of print better. So the paper shows the benefit, how much money we're actually leaving on the table by not illustrating the GRPs for magazines correctly. So getting that out there, so we're working really hard to make sure people are aware of that. I was at the ANA conference last weekend talking to the folks from NNA, which is a big modeling company, and saying, hey, we want to work with you to make sure you get the right inputs. All the secret sauce you have in your modeling, I don't want to be involved with, and I don't need to be involved with, but the inputs for magazines I want to help with. So that's a big project in terms of accountability. We also work a lot with our database, and I think magazines that have really rich databases, as Meredith has, are going to succeed in the future because we know a lot about our customers. So any way we can look at database matching and shifts in sales behavior, that can be really helpful. So that's another, I think, another big thing. So accountability probably takes up a big chunk of what I'm currently doing. The other part of it is constantly figuring out ways to get insights. How do we get insights from people? And using our community space community, which we call Real Women Talking. It's about our Real Women Talking. The other part of what we're doing is I spend a lot of time here too. Do we have a 24-hour day? Is it a 12-hour day? Is the interactive connection. So what's the role that consumers play when they're reading a magazine? What are their expectations when they pick up a magazine? What are their expectations when they go to our websites? So learning more and more about what's happening online is hugely important. And I think what's interesting is that most of the people that are in the interactive field, or they started out there, were the younger folks who had no background in other media. And what I'm finding is a lot of folks are coming in with backgrounds in television or in print in our case. A lot of the best practices we've learned on research can be applied to online. So everyone talks about the internet being the most measurable medium. Now, theoretically it is, but when it comes down to actually looking at it, are click-throughs the way to measure? No, certainly not when less than 1% of people clicked. So that is an area where we're trying to merge our two groups in a way that makes it much more combined and together and beneficial for advertisers the more we know.
Britta, with your media mix modeling project, have you applied it in the real world, and if so, what are the results?
Sure. The paper that I discussed is a paper that actually took a real-life example to show that variations. putting in the inputs in the traditional way, which is either in the first week or spread out of the first month, versus the way we think is more replicates what actually happens. We actually saw huge increases in ROI. So there's a lot of money that you would have benefited from magazines if you had actually put the right inputs in. So that's sort of a general, and that's in the paper, and I can share that paper with you. More specifically at Meredith, we actually did it for a client. I won't go into details on the client, but we actually did say, hey, we think we can win in the model, so using these new tools and new inputs, let's take a look at a real-life situation for a real-life client and show that print actually can work in the models, and that was successful. But I think part of the good news I found from interviewing all the modeling companies was when I said that the premise of this paper was print doesn't work in the models. Well, actually, it turns out that print actually worked pretty well in the models, even already. I mean, the modelers love print. They think it works well. They would have liked to have better input data, but there are lots of examples where magazines work exceptionally well. So it's just a matter of improving the input, and then the output will be even better than it currently is.
Does it vary by client? Does it vary by magazine?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think any accountability will vary by, I think, the most important part it varies by is sort of the elephant in the room, which is the message. I mean, a lot of onus is put on the media to prove accountability when, if the message isn't tested, isn't clear, or the product isn't ideal, it's not going to do well. So it hugely varies by the client. And actually, I had a paper a couple of years ago with Judy Bahari at Starcom on the role that the content plays, role the advertising plays, not just the content. And the advertising plays a huge role. What the message is plays a huge role, which is kind of a duh. But a lot of people don't take that into consideration. If the ad doesn't do well, the ad doesn't get recall, isn't persuasive, isn't a benefit to me as a consumer, I'm not going to react to it. So it's another area that we're, as an industry, pushing towards is print copy testing. I mean, from your TV background, copy testing is done on probably 90% of all the TV ads. It's actually probably gone down based on cost. But that's the converse for magazines. Magazine copy testing is very limited. Typically can pull your TV objective and apply them to magazines. And oftentimes that doesn't work. We have lots of examples where the client wants to measure accountability based on drive to web, and there's no URL in the print ad. So that area, I mean, it's a really good question because it's the client, the creative is a bigger issue than practically anything else. Our job is to provide the environment, the appropriate environment, and to provide the right target.